Hello, okay, I'm hoping that everyone can hear me okay. Please check your audio settings as we get started here. Good afternoon and happy Friday to everyone. My name is Colin Usher and I'm the foster care point of contact here at the Department of Education. Today we will be presenting some important and timely information concerning laws and regulations for foster care students in Nevada. I want to first thank everyone for joining us on a Friday afternoon and hope that you find this to be a good use of your time. Got a couple of housekeeping items here. Since we're using GoToWebinar, I would like to quickly review a couple of key points. First, we will be taking all of your questions in written format, and this helps us by not needing to open up the microphone since we have several people on the webinar. And second, it will allow us to have a record of your question just in case we can't answer it today. We can follow up with an answer after the conclusion of the webinar. Here's how to submit a question, okay? You'll want to locate the question panel on your navigation bar and then enter your question and hit the send button. We are going to be answering your questions in the order as they come in, and it's really that last half hour that we're looking at for the question and answer period. So we're not going to do any periodic check-ins for questions or answers, just that time at the end. And if we don't get to your question, we'll follow up with a written response within the next week or two. Let's move on for some introductions. So this is going to serve as a quick mic check as well. Since I've already introduced myself, I'm going to go ahead and start with Kristen Kelly. Kristen is with the American Bar Association Center on Children and the Law, where she's an assistant director. Are you with us, Kristen?
Hi, Colin.
Hello. Glad you made it. Next, we have Emily Peeler. Emily is also with the American Center on Children and the Law, and she's a staff attorney, and she's working with Kristen Kelly, so I know that she's also in the wings available. And we've got Rochelle Rillo listed here. Rochelle is with the Intervention Department in the Washoe County School District. Rochelle is the department coordinator, and she's not able to be with us today due to a family emergency, but she's an incredible resource in Washoe County, so I wanted to keep her information listed here just in case you wanted to contact her in the future. Next, we have Carrie Pruitt with Washoe County's Human Services Agency. Carrie is a program coordinator and educational liaison. Hello, Carrie.
Hello.
Hello. And we also have Katie Morales, who's with the Washoe County School District. She works with children in transition, and she's a program coordinator. Are you there, Katie?
Hi, everyone.
And last but not least, we have Jean Marsh with the Washoe County Human Services Agency, Children's Services Division. And Jean is a division director. Are you there, Jean?
I am. Welcome.
All right. So let's move on here. We're going to start with a poll question about your current level of knowledge on today's topic. So let me get the poll set up here. I'll give you just a few seconds to answer this question. I see a lot of people answering. I'm just give you a few more seconds. All right, I'm going to close it out. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we've got 21% with no knowledge, 67% with limited knowledge, 13% with adequate knowledge. Nobody said they were an expert. So it seems as though this is going to be a really good webinar for everybody who's here. All right, excellent. Moving right along, I'm going to invite Kristen Kelly from the American Bar Association to present the next couple of slides concerning our group's collaborative effort, as well as the national and state perspective around ESSA and AB 491. So take it away, Kristen.
Thanks so much, Colin. Hi, everyone. As Colin said, I'm Kristen Kelly. I'm with the American Bar Association Center on Children and Law, which is based in Washington, D.C. I am an attorney who's worked for the last 11 years on a national project that we call the Legal Center for Foster Care and Education. Our project works at the federal, state, and local level to improve policy and practice around the educational needs of students in the foster care system. I have to start off by saying I'm really grateful for the support of the Walter S. Johnson Foundation, who's provided us a small grant to work in Nevada to support the child welfare, education, and court systems to improve the stability and success of students in foster care. Nevada is really an example for other states of the amazing progress that can happen if you have a targeted focus on students in foster care. I've been really impressed over the years by the dedication of all the stakeholders throughout Nevada, both from the leadership of child welfare, education, and courts at the state and county level, all the way down to the frontline caseworkers, teachers, and everyone working directly with students in foster care. I'm really honored to share your work in the other states that we work in as an example to others. My goal for the next couple minutes is just to provide a little bit of an overview of how we got here. The main focus of the webinar today is going to be to talk about Nevada's new law, AB 491, and to hear, most importantly, about the excellent collaborative work that's been going on in Washoe County for many years to support the educational success of students in foster care. But before we get started, I just wanted to provide some historical context. Both from the federal perspective, but also from the Nevada perspective. Students in foster care are a really very vulnerable group of students. In fact, research is increasingly showing us that they're more vulnerable than even other vulnerable students, like low-income students, homeless students, and English language learners. So recognizing the need to give some targeted focus on this population of students, for many years, there's been a really growing national momentum in states as well as at the federal level to try and make some policy changes and practice changes to try and better support these students. In 2008, a major federal law was passed that for the first time, it's called the Fostering Connections Act. And this law spanned a wide variety of issues, but one portion of the law related to the educational success of students in foster care. And this law was the first time that child welfare agencies were required by federal law to really prioritize and focus on the education of students in foster care. Before this law change, many students in foster care were struggling with very high rates of school instability. And so what this meant is when they first entered foster care, oftentimes they were required to change schools because their living placement changed. And then throughout their time in foster care, living placements were frequently changing. And with each of these with each of these living placement changes, unfortunately, all too often, it usually equated to a school change. And we all know from our own experience how turbulent it can be to change schools. Not only are you losing sort of academic progress and credits, but you're also losing the connections to your peers and your teachers that children so desperately need. So because of this, the Fostering Connections Act required child welfare agencies for the first time to really make a targeted focus on trying to keep children's school placement stabilized. So both when they're first entering foster care, trying to keep them in the same school and find living placement options near that child's school, but then also trying to minimize school disruption during the time that they're in care. But even with the child welfare law change, it was clear that child welfare agencies couldn't just do this on their own, that the only way that you could really sort of make a big impact on the educational outcomes and success of students in foster care was to work collaboratively with education agencies and with the court system. So in 2011, the United States Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Education sponsored a national summit, which was based in Washington, D.C. And they brought together every state. Every state brought a team with representatives from the child welfare, education, and court systems. And the goal of the convening was to have each state come up with a plan to better support the educational needs of students in foster care. So the Nevada Powerhouse team came up with a detailed plan, and the first thing that they did was to create a statewide team that represented leaders from around the state, from the child welfare and education agencies, the Supreme Court, and leaders from the county child welfare and education agencies and juvenile courts as well. They called this group the Statewide Collaborative on Education, Child Welfare, and the Courts. And since that time, in 2011, when they formed, this group has been meeting regularly to work on developing the policy and practice changes that are needed to make sure that students in Nevada can succeed. One of the first activities that the group did was host a statewide summit, which was modeled off the federal version. And the idea was to have counties come together and develop plans for what they can do around foster care and education success. Nevada was one of the first states in the whole country to do this and was an example for others about the huge impact that you can make when you work together collaboratively. Since that time, federal laws continued the momentum towards better protections for students in foster care related to their education. A number of states, including Nevada, reported challenges with child welfare agencies being able to have access to a student's education records. And so in 2013, a federal law called the Uninterrupted Scholars Act was passed, and this made an amendment to the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, some of you might be familiar with FERPA, to make it easier for child welfare agencies and others working with students in foster care to access those critically needed school records. Then in 2015, federal education law, the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is known as ESSA, for the first time ever included rights and protections for students in foster care. The purpose of the changes in the rights and provisions that were included was to carry on the many years of collaboration that had been happening and to make sure that schools were equal partners in trying to support and ensure the educational success of students in foster care. The law gave students in foster care a number of really important rights. Many of them paralleled what had previously been done through the Fostering Connections Act, which was a child welfare law. It gave students in foster care the right to remain in their same school, the right to immediate enrollment in a new school when schools change, and it most importantly required state and local education agencies and child welfare agencies to work together to develop plans to ensure the stability and success of all students in foster care. So to implement these federal requirements, the 2008 Fostering Connections Act, as well as the 2015 Every Student Succeeds Act, in July, Nevada passed AB 491. AB 491 details the requirements of the federal law, and it sets Nevada up as a real national example on how to ensure that students in foster care get the supports and services that they so critically need. So I'm now going to turn it back to Colin, who's going to provide us more detail about Nevada's AB 491.
All right, thank you, Kristen. That was excellent. All right, so included in your handouts for our webinar today, you should have received the AB 491 fact sheet. And this fact sheet is very beneficial. It breaks down the Assembly Bill into easy to digest sections. So we're going to quickly walk through each of these sections, and I'll give you the highlights. The top section of this document outlines the importance of our state collaborative group working together to implement the laws that affect students in foster care. Concerning school stability, school mobility has been shown to have a negative effect on school performance. AB 491 is really our answer to that problem. It will support students with school stability and increase their chances to be academically successful. At the bottom of the first page, you will see the historical information concerning foster care student school stability. Here we see the connection between the federal law and its requirement for child welfare agencies and educational agencies to focus on school stability. This section also outlines the historical importance of child welfare and educational agencies in their collaborative efforts concerning the best interest of the child in foster care. With the passing of ESSA in 2015 and the impending implementation of this law, Nevada passed AB 491, as Kristen mentioned, in this last legislative session. The bottom of this page points you to the resources that are cited in this information here. All right, and then this is the top half of page 2. So here we've stated that everyone who's involved with foster care students really needs to understand the rights and protections concerning educational stability and success. And this leads us into the best interest determination section. This section is really critical, and it outlines the steps in the best interest process. Here we see all of the factors that must be considered in the process, and one very important thing to note, the cost of transportation rule. So I'll move on from this section by urging you actually to go back and review this page for all the particulars in making the best interest determination. This is the bottom of page 2, and it highlights some of the specific rights that foster care students have. First, students have the right to stay in their school of origin, which is the school they are enrolled in when they are placed in foster care. Second, they have the right to transportation to their school, and the cost of this transportation is the joint responsibility of both the child welfare agency and the education agency. If there's a dispute, it has to be resolved through the juvenile or family court system. During a potential dispute, the child should still continue to receive transportation to and from school. The last student right outlined on this page, and really the beginning of the next page, concerns the student's right to immediate enrollment in a new school. So if it is determined that it's in the best interest of the child, foster care students in this position cannot be turned away for lacking documentation such as the birth certificate, school record, or immunization records. And you can see the last part of the sentence there at the top of this next page. Concerning foster care points of contact, state and county welfare agencies, as well as education agencies, are to designate a point of contact person for foster care. One of the handouts that I also attached to the webinar is the point of contact sheet that I'm maintaining here at the Department of Ed. So I'm urging you today to review that document when you get a chance, and then send along any updates that you might have. The state points of contact for the Department of Ed and Child Welfare are listed at the bottom of this slide for your reference. So feel free to reach out if you have questions. This is the last few sections of page 3 of the document we sent. Concerning the report of academic gains for students in foster care, I've had conversations here with Glenn Meyer, who's our IT director at the Department of Ed, and he's working on a notification system within Infinite Campus for schools across our state. Also, once all the aspects of the IC system are set up for foster students, Glenn is really confident that academic reports will be available through that system. Lastly, we see this section on the submission of foster care academic information to the juvenile court. Child welfare agencies will be required to submit an academic plan for all students in foster care. Other required information to be submitted to the juvenile court is outlined in this last section of the final paragraph. Concerning the academic plan, our collaborative group is currently working on a template that would fulfill this requirement and could be implemented statewide. So we could be reaching out to several of you over the next few weeks for your feedback on our design, so just be on the lookout for that. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the folks in Washoe County for an overview of their memorandum of understanding process related to AB 491. So take it away, Washoe.
This is Jean Marsh with Washoe County Department of, Human Services Agency. We originally developed, reached out to the school district in early 2006 because we were having trouble with enrolling foster children in school due to some of the barriers that were just described earlier about having the proper documentation, who was allowed to do so, et cetera. And so the department director at the time, Mike Capello, and the superintendent of schools, Superintendent Dugan, convened a meeting. And during that process, during that meeting, we were talking about the enrollment process, and that was the genesis of the conversation. And in that meeting, somebody stated, why don't we consider foster youth? Why don't we treat foster youth as the same benefits as children in transition, and therefore eligible for the opportunities provided to children under the McKinney-Vento Act support? And so it was through an enrollment process that we started talking, and that's when we discussed allowing children to have, foster children to have school enrollment, lunch enrollment automatically, being eligible for transportation. So it was a meeting to solve a problem that just blossomed because the school district was very committed to making sure foster children achieved academic success, as well as our department. So it truly was, it was not spearheaded by the Social Services Department. It was due to an interest from the school district to make sure that these children were properly served. And we learned a lot. We learned much about the agency, the now Human Services Agency's lack of communication to the district, and how frustrating it was for the district when we didn't communicate it appropriately. As an example, at that time, and this is going back, 10 years or so, 7 years, I believe that we felt from the Social Services Agency that we were the ones that truly cared about these youth, and that we were the ones that were looking out for their best interests. And what we learned through these meetings is that many times the teachers, the counselors had a very strong connection to the children, yet we would remove a child from the school. We would transition to, or not transition, we would take the child from one school and place in another school due to placement reasons, living placement reasons, sometimes without even a transition. I recall a teacher being very upset with me, visibly upset with me, because a little a child in her classroom wasn't even able to get their backpack. And so what we learned from those early meetings is that both sides wanted to meet the youth's needs, and both of us thought that the other wasn't doing enough. And so it allowed us an opportunity to sit down and state what we expected, what we believed was in the youth's best interest, and how we were going to meet it. And so it was a pretty simple document that just said how, it started out with how are we going to enroll kids? And then once they're enrolled, how are they going to be flagged for free lunches? And then how are we going to flag the counselors that, a new child is in their school? So it has that meeting and that process has blossomed into better communication and better understanding about each other's needs and about what our limitations are that go beyond just education. And so it started out as how do we get these kids enrolled in school without birth certificates, to then a memorandum of understanding that was just kind of tweaked fairly without much work to be current with ESSA, because all of the goals in ESSA were what we had 11 years ago. I think that what we all had 11 years ago. It just took us this long to codify it in law. So it was a meeting that was convened simply because we were at each other's, we were getting very frustrated with each other, and we had the right people at the table that just wanted to dissolve barriers and make it work.
Add too on that piece of just Tom, Martha, and Eric Bai built such a strong relationship that they were able to kind of have those innovative thoughts of how can we support foster students with giving them access. Really on both sides to build these.
Yeah, I don't think.
Oh, you can't hear me at all? Hello?
Now.
You just missed an amazing sentence that I just said. So I was just talking about how important the relationship between Eric and Tom had, where they really both were able to advocate for each agency, but collaborate together. And I think that really helped build the MOU.
I agree. And so this is Jean Marsh again, and I apologize, my name is coming up differently. But so then what's happened then, so we start off with enrollment, and then we start looking at a significant issue for the district is how do we pay for busing of children? We started evaluating every child that was transported to their school and where they were staying, where they lived, and what that cost was. And so Carrie Pruitt, who is our educational liaison and our fiscal officer, started looking at 4E allowable expenses. And so we just now entered into our memorandum of understanding includes a provision that will allow us to start reimbursing the school district for allowable expenses for school transportation, because that's the big issue right now with everybody's budgets being so tight. How do we maintain school stability so that it meets AU's needs, but also is that is doable, if you will. So we have not yet cut that check, but everything is in place for it. We have the document that allows the pass-through of funds, and that was necessary for our legal advisors. And we are now capturing that information, and we are going to be able to go back and to bill for subsequent quarters through 4E for children that are 4E eligible. And for those of you in child welfare on the line, our penetration rate for children in care that are 4E eligible is about 64%. So not all children are 4E eligible, but those funds will support it. And then we'll have to use a combination of other funds that will support those transportation needs as required by law. And we talk a lot about transportation because school stability has been a major focus of Washoe County for quite some time. Yet at the same time, we know it has to be logical and it has to make sense. And so we follow the state guidelines about school stability. And if we believe it's in a child's best interest to change a school, there is a administrative authorization process to do that, because from an agency standpoint, we did not necessarily hold the school stability as the same level of priority as other issues. And so that has shifted. So there is some administrative oversight around school stability, but we try to balance it with what makes sense and what truly is in the child's best interest. Therefore, the state guideline about that the school stability checklist drives that conversation for staff. Staff are not allowed to independently authorize a child's move from a school. And Colin,
I think the last 10 years, we've really built such an amazing collaboration. This is Katie Morales, between Washoe County School District and Washoe County Department of Social Services. And so many things happen within that 10 years. And I think one of the big ones, kind of like Jean was talking about, is that transportation, because that's kind of been our biggest barrier. So in 2010 and 2011, we were able to use Title I Part D funds to build a transportation router who would focus only on those students to get them to and from school. And after seeing the high need of students who we were transporting, Washoe County School Districts, the department decided to actually fund position. So we were able to continue to have a router who is still there today. And then also in the last 10 years, like in 2013, the Uninterrupted Scholars Act happened, and that really led us to be able to build Infinite Campus and our Unity tab to kind of give access to both Washoe County School District and social services to have that freedom to share information to really support our students' educational needs. So it's just been amazing to see kind of where we have gone from in the last 10 years to where we are now.
Katie, this is Jean. Can you explain just very briefly what the router position is? Because I think that's fairly unique, I believe, and that might be helpful to some of the listeners.
Yeah, of course. So we have a transportation router who works with doing our foster students and our CIT students. And he, anytime a student is about to either move basements or has moved because of a homeless situation, we send in a transportation request, and he works on making sure we can get them routed back to their school of origin. And he probably has, I think it's like a 98% rate of keeping kids at their school of origin. And this past year with foster and homeless, we did, I think, over 1,000 routes back to their schools.
Colin, this is Jean. I think that's as much as far as the history from the Human Services Agency as I think would be interesting. I don't know if there's any other questions that you might have for me or anything that I missed.
And we can go to the next slide too.
You may go on. Okay.
Okay, this is Carrie Pruitt, and as we just discussed, thank you, Jean, for such a great overview of how we've been working to implement the ESSA requirements and the AB 491 within our agency. So we thought we'd take the opportunity to share with everyone some of the processes that we are going through as a child welfare agency, and then the school district is going to share some of their processes as well. So as Jean mentioned, the process that we go through in order to make sure that we are following the guidelines for educational stability is very structured. And since 2010, with the Fostering Connections Act, when the educational stability guidelines are established, our agency has been using that as a tool to guide decisions on what is in the best interest of the student overall. And those specific guidelines have now been implemented into the ESSA and also at the state level at AB 491. So we try to do our homework other than just sitting and going through a checklist. What we do is we actually look at it comprehensively, and we include the school district in that decision because these children have so many, their needs are so dynamic that we need to make sure that we have all the most important players at the table. So while we go through this process, as Jean mentioned, we do have an approval process, and now that we have Jenny Esplund, who is the new Washoe County School District foster care liaison, her position is new, and she's able to help bridge some of those gaps as far as reaching out to the schools and finding out what their input is before we complete our decision-making process regarding children transitioning to a new school, whether it's a decision to keep them in their school of origin or based on their specific needs. It may be to transition them to a zone school, or there could be a different school that can better meet their needs based on potential special ed services, special education services that are required to meet the student's needs. When we have that type of a case with special ed, we also include the IEP team, and we try to default to them for their recommendation because that is a dynamic that is overseen by special education services. And so by including the school district in those decisions, we're able to then come to a decision on what we feel, based on all of these factors, is the best placement as far as the school for that student. And we feel confident that those, although they can be tough decisions, because we have so many factors involved, and we are always, our goal is to reunify with the parents, yet the student may be most stable in a permanent placement for a certain period of time. We have to weigh all of those factors. And so this process is working for us. We are working to formalize that process. And one exciting thing that we're doing, and it's taking a little time, but we are developing an education manual for our agency. And what that is, it's a guideline for all of our agency staff that incorporates our current practices for child welfare, and incorporates that with all the education needs of the students. So we're blending those two school thoughts, those processes together, and formalizing documentation that's going to exist in our policy manual. And it's going to help on a few fronts. It's going to help new trainees, and it's also going to help existing staff to have a point of reference to go back to and make sure they're following the guidelines as we are trying to stay compliant with federal and state laws. So those meetings are held, and those decisions are then made. Final approval is then provided by our agency leadership before that school change can be initiated. And that's I think one of the biggest pieces of the change in the MOU, and then the implementation of the ESSA and AB 491 within our agency. Jean, did you want to add anything to that?
No, that's great.
Okay.
And I think another just important thing about with ESSA and AB 491 is building that foster liaison position within the school district. It just built another relationship that we could build with social services. So both Carrie and Jenny have built such a strong relationship where Jenny is out training all of our schools on foster, and Carrie's training the side of her agency, and together they're making sure we're meeting the needs of all of our students who are in foster care. And really, I think, important piece of this and exciting part is that Jenny Espelin, who is through Washoe County School District, is actually located at Washoe County Social Services. So the collaboration between the two agencies is even stronger, and we're really working together to make sure we're looking at each individual student and how we can support their needs.
Absolutely. And through that process, a lot of challenges, just, in the completion of the MOU that I came on board almost a year. And again, this is Carrie Pritt, Social Services. Of course, one of the most obvious, pieces of documenting everything legally is to involve our legal team. So we involved, we sought, of course, the blessing of our own legal team through Children's Services, and then of course then had to go back and forth, with the school district and get their blessing from their legal team. And so we had a few cooks in the kitchen, and after a handful of attempts, the important thing is it was our goal to complete this, and so we're all on the same team here. And this relationship is so important to us and has evolved over so many years, as we were describing, that we did eventually make it happen. And but that's a challenge when legal teams are involved, and then eventually having the final signatures by both of our department heads. But we persevered. We have a great working document that, as you folks can review, is fairly comprehensive. And then we move on to, again, like Katie was saying, educating our teams on both sides. And that is, of course, a learning curve, as we all, I mean, the school district has thousands of employees, and our agency has hundreds of employees. And so trying to, of course, educate everyone and provide support to all of those people is very, very important. And so that's what we strive to do every day, and that takes time. And so we're just moving forward and excited that we've come as far as we have, because this relationship is important. These kids are part of all of our lives.
And I think one thing that MOU was, it did take time. I mean, we probably sent it back, you know, back and forth probably a half a dozen times to have their legal, our legal, change a word here, change a word there. So it wasn't a quick thing, but it definitely worked out. So it wasn't an, okay, we did this overnight, but it probably took a couple of months for us to make sure we had everything we needed in the MOU.
Absolutely. I think that we can transition to the next piece.
And here's a quick example of our Unity foster tab that we have at campus. So the exciting part about the Unity foster tab is that every night Unity Washoe County Social Services IT talks to our Washoe County School District's IT, and they let us know anytime a student is put into placement, and within 24 hours we're able to see where that student is so we can make sure we're providing services. And then you can go to the next slide. Not only are we tracking our students in the Unity Foster tab, but we're also tracking them in our Foster Transportation tab. So we can be able to see how many times a student moves around, where their bus is located, just so we can have more data on our students, but also make sure we're giving them the support that they need. And then our last slide, have just Jenny Esplin talk about our academic plans that we're using with our students, and also show that tab.
All right. Is that everything for Washoe County? That was. Well, thank you, Katie, Carrie, and Jean for that, and I really appreciate you putting that together and walking us through the process that you have in Washoe County and how it evolved over several years of finalizing that MOU process. We are going to move on to question and answer period. And so as you've been asking questions, they've been coming up here on our slides, and we can pull them up here and we'll just go through them one by one. The first one we've got here says, Nevada Connections Academy is a state-sponsored charter with children located all over the state. It does not matter where in the state they reside. They can continue schoolwork as long as the new caretaker is registered with NCA. Since the state-sponsored charter authority is its own district, how do these regulations apply to us? Anybody have thoughts on that from our collaborative team concerning Nevada Connection? So a virtual school, how does that work? Do we have anybody want to tackle that?
This is Jean. I'll start from the Child Welfare Agency. I think what we would look at is it a school move? Was the child doing online learning through the Nevada Connections prior to removal, prior to the child entering foster care? and we'd want to look at why that occurred. And so I think it would just be, again, looking at where the child is in their school performance, how they're doing, their social connections, etc. Because we fully support and have benefited greatly from that source of education. So I don't know if I could answer from a global child welfare perspective, just from this agency, is we would just want to understand how that, as we do with any youth, where are they coming into the school system? Where are they coming from? What do we have for them to do? So would it not be something that we would not support? We would just want to find out a little bit more how it fits the youth's needs.
Yeah, thank you, Jean, for that clarification. I'm not sure. Does anybody else have anything to add? We can definitely do some research on this, and it's a tricky question with having a virtual school and how these regulations apply to a virtual school.
And this is Carrie, and I would, of course, want to know more specifically, how, what the question would be as far as how it would differ or not with the law. Like Jean said, we do fully support, students attending charter schools, and we've had just a couple, come up since the law change, and we've worked together. We haven't had any issues that have required us to go back to enforce the law or review that with the school, but we believe the students have the right to attend, and we continue to support our foster students. We haven't seen any huge challenges, I guess, with that at this point, so just thought I'd add that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you again for the additional information there. We've got the second question we've got here is, what is 4E eligibility? Is this directly out of AB 491, 4E eligibility?
This is Jean. Since I brought it up, I'll mention what that is. The federal government supports the child welfare agencies in placement costs through Social Security Act Administration, Title 4E funding. And so we have a portion of our budget is received from these 4E reimbursements from the federal government. The federal government has determined that a youth in foster care transportation cost can be an allowable expense under 4E Social Security rules. And 4E is determined by there's an eligibility criteria that determines whether a child is eligible for that funding stream, and that's based on parent income, disability. There's several different factors that go into determining whether a child is eligible for 4E. And actually, Kristen Kelly might even be able to answer. I don't mean to put you on the block, but a little bit better from the federal aspect. But it is a funding stream available to child welfare agencies for children that are in foster care that allows reimbursement of expenses related to placement, transportation. There's a few other things that are eligible for reimbursement costs at the local level by the federal government.
Hey, Jean, this is Kristen just chiming in to say I think that you summarized it pretty well. I don't think that I have much more to add on that unless anybody has any additional questions, but I think that you did a pretty good recap of federal reimbursability.
Perfect. All right, thank you both. The next question we have is whether or not NDE will be adding the Unity tab for all districts. So I'm suspecting that the Unity tab was something that Washoe County put in themselves, and it's something specific to what their needs were. I can follow up with our IT department and ask about having the Unity tab added for a statewide setup. If that's something that all districts would need, then we can definitely look into that. So I'll follow up on that one.
This is Jean. I might be able to answer that a little bit. It was a work priority that we put into the Unity system as well to do that with the Infinite Campus system. And so I do believe that because Infinite Campus was going statewide, that this will be available to all jurisdictions that are using Infinite Campus. Which
okay. Okay. Excellent. That is good information. Because we had another question about Unity and whether or not that was something specific to Washoe County. So I appreciate you following up on that. We had a question about whether or not the PowerPoint would be made available. So yes, I'll attach the PowerPoint as a handout after the conclusion of our webinar today, so everyone will get a copy of that. Let's see here. Where does the reunification process fall within the overall foster system? Is it even part of the foster system?
This is Jean. I will attempt to answer that from the Human Services Agency. The reunification, if I have the answer correct, and Colin, correct me if I don't have it, but how does reunification fall into this whole system? So how Washoe County views it is that our number one goal is to reunify a child safely with their family, their birth family, or the whom they were removed. And so what we do is that when we're working reunification, we are involving the parent and all, that be education, medical, etc. So if a parent is, for example, if a parent wants to change their child's school because they believe it's in their child's best interest because it might be, closer to their home, they could walk to school for whatever reason that is, and we are working with the family, then we will work with the family to make those decisions. Ultimately, we want to be out of their lives, and so we encourage parents to be involved in those decisions that impact their children. So if a parent chose to change after we're moving towards a reunification plan, chose to change that school, and it did not impact the child's education outcome, for example, it wasn't educational neglect, then we would support the parent's decision in doing so. And again, that's provided, generally what happens at that point, we have worked on an in-home safety plan. We have been working with the family for quite a while, so the child has been living in both worlds, if you will. So, but we do support a parent's decisions related to their children, whether it's education, medical, whatever that might be, provided we believe it's in the child's best interest.
Perfect. Thank you. I've got a question here about whether or not NDE will have Infinite Campus create an academic plan feature. So I'm going to rely on the folks from Washoe again here. So it's my understanding that within Infinite Campus, there is an academic plan tab already in there, but that you can upload a template if you'd like. Is that correct?
Carrie, I'm going to defer to you.
Yeah, and Katie, you might like to chime in on this one too. The academic plan tab is already established through the Washoe County School District, and I believe that any modifications to that any modifications that are being discussed, because I believe they're looking at improving that process, goes through the school district and up through their data services. Do I have that correct, Katie? Can't hear you.
Yeah, Katie, we're having trouble with your audio for sure.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
good.
there you are.
Okay, so Jenny's gonna kind of speak on a piece of the academic plan. Plan is only done through Infinite Campus. There's actually not a template for it. So all counselors have access through Infinite Campus, and they will go in and build the academic plan.
Katie, we're still struggling to hear you. I don't know why, but your audio is...
So I don't know why either. We can send some information about our academic plans maybe to you, Colin, and you can send it out.
Sure, sure. And that last part came across real clear. So thank you for that. So our next question is about NCA. Who would we ask? What if the foster care parents are not interested in continuing with NCA?
This is Jean. I'm not sure what NCA is. I'm trying to figure out what that abbreviation might be. So I'll speak from as maybe somebody's replying to what NCA means. We worked our licensing folks and everything have worked really diligently with foster parents on quality parenting initiative and what the expectation is for fostering. And so we have had discussions that if a foster parent refuses to participate, whether they are an actual good placement for that child. And so it could disrupt a placement if a foster parent is unwilling to participate in education-related decision-making. But I'm not sure if that's answering the question.
Yeah, so NCA is Nevada Connections Academy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So what if the foster parents are not interested in continuing with Nevada Connections Academy?
I'm speaking, and this is Jean Marsh, strictly from Washoe County. We would want to find out why. For example, it depends on the level of support that the care provider is making towards social connections, because what we know to be very important for many youth are some of those social connections, being able to participate in a track team or this learning environment. And so it would depend on what that youth needs are. If a foster parent, if NCA is determined to be in the youth's best interest, that is the best education outcome for that youth, and the foster parent is flat refusing, then that to me speaks to a broader issue about the foster parent's willingness to look at outcomes based on the child's needs and not their needs. So while I can't give a very specific yes, no type of an answer, it would cause concern that and we do talk in team within the agency, because generally people making this decision are school included, alternate education type of settings, school staff, social work staff, care providers, birth families, that if that team believes that that's in the best interest and the only person that doesn't is the foster parent, then I've got a broader issue than just, that education piece.
Anybody have anything to add to that? Thank you, Jean, for tackling that. The next question here is, how will you inform school and state employees that through AB 491, it's not mandating that a student stay at their school of origin, but rather it provides them with the right to stay? Tricky question. I think that part of that, the answer to that is reaching out to folks like this webinar is doing today to inform about AB 491 and educate people on that. But yeah, I mean, it could, and feeling like the student must stay at the school of origin, it really is it's a setup to it comes back to the best interest of the child and what's best for their educational needs. So again, I guess I would point them to that.
I think that's a great description and falls back into our normal process of identifying educational stability and best interest based on the holistic, the team approach, and covering all of those bases. This is Carrie Pruitt, sorry.
Thanks, Carrie. Okay, so follow up on the 4E question. So this is probably you again, Jean. So it says, sorry, I'm not clear. 4E is a funding stream from what agency?
From the federal government. It goes from, it's from the Social Security Administration. So it's a federal funding stream that is allocated to the state, and then in Nevada, because we are county run in the 2 major counties, the state then passes that money through to the counties.
Okay, yeah, good clarification there. Okay, let's see what we've got left. I think that's everything. I think we've covered all the questions we've received.
Colin?
Yes.
This is Carrie Pruitt. I was wondering if I could just circle back real quick to the first question that I believe it was Diane that she had on Nevada Connections Academy and charter schools. And yes. I just pulled the law up real quick, and I would highly recommend, if anyone would like to look into this further, if you go on the Nevada Legislative webpage and drill down into AB 491, if you pull up the as enrolled copy, you'll have the details of the law. And it actually does say that local education agency includes the school district and its sponsors of charter schools. And also further says that basically that the law here, I'll just read this little section, body of a charter school, so must allow a pupil who leaves foster care to remain in his or her school of origin until the end of the school year, during which a child leaves foster care unless the parent or guardian of the pupil elects to enroll the pupil in a different school. So the protections are they're the same for state-sponsored charter schools as I read it, and I think one of the main challenges as far as data sharing, we don't have that if they're kind of outside the Washoe County School District. We don't have the ability to share the data at the same level because they don't have utilized Infinite Campus. But as far as I understand it, and we haven't had any challenges with this yet, but and hopefully we won't. But it also supports the charter schools, so I believe that they should be protected under the same umbrella.
Gary, could you drop that link in the chat window for everybody to see?
The link to the law?
Is that what you just looked up there?
Yeah, I'd have to go. I'm in my own PDF saved on my.
Oh, okay. Okay.
If I can get to it quick while we're chatting, I will do my best.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Oh, let's see, we might have gotten another question here. Okay, so it says here, I understand it includes charters, but when they write these things, they rarely, in our experience, consider statewide virtual charters, of which Nevada has several. We just want to make sure that we are able to follow the regulations.
Absolutely. Reading the AB 491, as I understand it, they should be protected under the same law. So.
Okay. All right. Well, with no more. Sorry.
I'm still trying to find that link real quick for you, if I can.
Great. Yeah, we can add that link as part of a FAQ afterwards. So if you can't get it in there, no problem. All right. So we're going to do another poll question here to wrap up. Let's see here. Okay, I'm launching it now. So this is a question about how beneficial today's webinar was increasing your knowledge regarding ESSA and the AB 491 requirements. Okay, a few more seconds. All right, closing and sharing the poll. It's good to see that, for the most part, people got something out of this today, and at least a few points, if not several key points. And I'll just follow up by saying that, you know, as you learn more and as you read more about the AB 491 regulations, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to anyone who presented today. They're all very responsive, and we, as you can see, we're learning along with you. Every question really has us doing our own research to discover the answer and then share that answer out. So I just encourage you to reach out to us as those questions come up. All right. Okay.
Yeah, just
go ahead.
a link.
Oh, did you find it?
Yeah. Did to the entire audience. Let me know if you can see it.
Let me see. I see it. Excellent. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I just wanted for attention to contact us as questions arise. We're here to help and just send you off and have a great weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.